Classic World of Warcraft allows players to experience the game as it was during the final patch of its original version, often referred to as vanilla, back when the level cap was 60 and the game's classes still had their original spells and talents. Importantly, Classic also lets players experience the old game map in the way that it was originally, before being streamlined or in many cases completely removed as part of later expansions. But there are still some areas that were updated so early in Vanilla's lifetime that their original version can never be visited by players again, not even in Classic. In this video, we'll take a look at a zone that was almost completely empty in terms of questing, loot and content in general, with an entire half of the zone that was likely never visited by a single player in the short time that it existed. This is the story of the original Silithus. In Classic World of Warcraft, which is based on the final patch of Vanilla, patch 1.12, Silithus is a high-level zone located in the south of Kalimdor, and it has become known for its abundance of quests and storylines, many of which require that players form groups to take on elite enemies for powerful rewards and lots of experience. During Classic, the zone was also the main stage for the server-wide opening of Ahn'Qiraj event, which sent players all around the game world to collect items and gather materials, and it culminated with a large-scale battle that was fought not only in Silithus, but also in the rest of Kalimdor. While Silithus did offer lots of content throughout most of Classic, and eventually Classic Era, the first players who made it into the zone shortly after Classic's release found that the NPCs in Cenarion Hold, the zone's main city, didn't offer any quests, which made the zone mostly irrelevant, with the exception of a few areas where players could farm elementals. Blizzard actually did this intentionally, so that the first phases of Classic would mimic the release of the original Vanilla, where Silithus also barely had any content. But what many Classic players don't know is that Silithus itself also looked different when World of Warcraft first released with patch 1.1 in late 2004. The most noticeable difference was that the zone used to consist of a northern and southern section that was separated by a large wall, then known as Ahn'Qiraj and later as the Scarab Wall. The southern part of Silithus had the same desert texture that players might be familiar with from Classic. It also had an entirely unique environment, as well as buildings that didn't exist anywhere else within the game world. The most notable of these could be found in the center of the zone, where the floor was covered by large pillars surrounded by a wall. Although the zone was mostly complete, there was no apparent way for players to bypass the Scarab Wall and enter the zone, which at the time didn't have a map, so even if someone did make it there, it would still appear undiscovered. The northern section of Silithus generally resembled the version we have in Classic, although it was slightly smaller, with fewer NPCs, most of which didn't drop any loot, and the zone's only city, Cenarion Hold, also didn't exist at the time. This has since led to the rumor that Silithus didn't have any quests when the game first released, but this is not the case because there was one questline called The New Frontier that started in either Stormwind for the Alliance or Thunderbluff for the Horde. The questline sent players to Valor's Rest near the entrance to Silithus, where they were offered two quests that could be completed in the Southwind village just nearby. After completing the quests, players were sent into Moonglade, where the questline suddenly ended, which some players found strange, seeing as they had only just been introduced to the zone. It only took a few months before Silithus received its first update in patch 1.3, when a short questline in the newly added Diremaul dungeons sent players back into Silithus. Interestingly, this new quest also took place in the Southwind village. It was also in patch 1.3 that the creatures of Silithus finally began dropping loot, and players now began visiting the zone in hopes of farming Essence of Air, which up until this point could only be acquired by farming Essence of Water, and then paying an alchemist to transmute it into Essence of Air, similar to the way that you would make Arcanite bars in Classic. In the following patch, Silithus received a minor update as hunters gained access to a class quest where they had to take down 4 elite demons, and one of these was Solinor the Slayer, disguised as Nelson the Nice, who could be found near the Scarab Wall in Silithus. The original version of Silithus received its final update in patch 1.6, when raiders were sent into the Crystal Vale to fight Thunderwren the Windseeker as part of the legendary Thunderfury quests. By this point, most of northern Silithus was still not utilized, while the southern section of the zone beyond the Scarab Wall had remained inaccessible ever since WoW's release. In patch 1.8, Silithus was finally given a revamp to prepare for the Gates of Ahn'Qiraj event, which was set to release during the following patch. With this update came the neutral town, Cenarion Hold, which became the zone's main quest hub, and in order to accommodate the many new quests, Previously empty spots in the desert were remade into questing areas such as the Bronzepit Encampment, Twilight Run, and the Hotel's Hideout Cave, which is best known for having a clone up in the mountain range above Don Moreau that made it possible for explorers to zone into and participate in Silithus' general chat, while their character was still located in the mountains between Loch Modan and Don Moreau. While it is generally believed that Hotel's hideout was copied from Silithus and into Don Moreau, it may actually have been the other way around, because the cave in Don Moreau existed before Hotel's hideout, although back then it didn't have a name. With the zone's update, Southern Silithus lost most of its assets and was also resized to a smaller version of itself. This resizing resulted in untextured lines across the terrain, as well as multiple holes in the game world, and the area now more closely resembled the view of an instance, which was only meant to be seen from the outside looking in, and less an actual zone. In the following patch, the southern side of the Scarab Wall was now replaced by 2 raids: the Ruins of Ahn'Qiraj, a moderately difficult 20-player raid, which provided catch-up gear for newer raiders, and the much more difficult Temple of Ahn'Qiraj, a 40-player raid that was even thought to be impossible when it first released. The 2 new raids did use some of the assets that had been removed from Southern Silithus in the previous patch, although on a much smaller scale. The 2 Ahn'Qiraj raids were unique because, unlike previously added raids, they weren't immediately available when the patch released. In order to open the gate and gain access to the raids, each realm first had to meet 2 conditions. Firstly, at least one player had to have completed the quest for the Scepter of the Shifting Sands, which began with a long grind inside the 3 hives of Silithus, followed by a questline that sent them and their raid group all around Azeroth to gather the 3 shards that formed the scepter. Apart from this, the realm also had to have completed the war effort, which required that the realm's players collectively gathered and donated millions of materials. After this, the Scarab Gong would become active, and the player, or in some cases multiple players, who had acquired the scepter could use it to sound the gong and permanently open the gates of Ahn'Qiraj for their realm. On most realms, both the war effort as well as the questline for the Scepter of the Shifting Sands took a long time to complete, and rather than just waiting, players began looking for a way that they could bypass the gates and enter Ahn'Qiraj without first having completed the war effort nor the questline. It wasn't long before players found ways to enter, either by bugging through the gates or climbing the mountainside and jumping down into Ahn'Qiraj, where fortunately none of the instance portals had been activated yet. When climbing the mountainside, players were able to get past Ahn'Qiraj and jump into Southern Silithus, which had now become even smaller after it had to make room for Ahn'Qiraj during patch 1.9. Interestingly, the old minimap inside the zone hadn't been updated, so explorers could still see where the old buildings used to be located before Silithus was remade back in patch 1.8. When Ahn'Qiraj finally opened, Southern Silithus wasn't part of it, and if players wanted to visit the zone, they would still need to wall jump through the mountains, which many did. Eventually, Southern Silithus was removed in its entirety when the old game world was updated in the Cataclysm expansion. It does still exist in Classic, where players can visit using some of the same wall jumps, and in recent years, it has even been used for the OTK dueling tournament, where contestants were fighting in the large open field that had once been the center of Southern Silithus.